What's up, y'all? It's Shuffle, and in today's video, we're going to talk about one common mistake for each hero in Darkest Dungeon. By all means, these are not the only mistakes possible, but these are the ones I see the most commonly with players, including myself, for each hero. And before we get started, make sure that if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, leave your thoughts down below in the comments, and if you want to check out the box below for all the cool stuff like Discord, Twitter, Twitch, and Patreon, there's probably something really cool for you to find and enjoy. So thank you for that. Normally I go in alphabetical order for the heroes. I think today we're going to change it up and we're going to go backwards. So let's start with Vestal. The main mistake that people make with Vestal is they focus too much on healing. Sounds kind of weird because Vestal is a healer, but as I've said in other videos in the past, healing is a reactive type of play. Darkest Dungeon is not a game you win usually by being reactive. You have to be proactive to get the best results. So Vestal has some proactive tools that are not healing. She has a stun, and she has Judgment, which can hit rank 4 or rank 3 if something is at low HP and finish it off. So these two different moves give her some kind of proactive thing to do, which usually stop more damage than you would have healed otherwise. For instance, why try and heal through Tree Branch Smackdown from a giant when you could try and stun it instead and prevent all of that damage instead of healing about a third of it? Next is Shieldbreaker, and the most common mistake I see with Shieldbreaker is not using Pierce. No, I'm kidding. It's not using Sway at the right time. So Serpent Sway is a very good move. It gives her 2 charges of Aegis, aka block, and this prevents any damage that she would take. She can still take the secondary effects, so if you get stress or bleed or blight or stun, for instance, those will go through the block, but you won't take any of the damage. This is kind of nice at Death's Door because if you don't take damage, you can't trigger a Death's Door check. However, what I do see is people usually hit Sway when she's at Death's Door or like incredibly low HP, which is still fine to do, but there are a lot of times where an enemy may have some kind of big move heading your way, and you should be blocking preemptively. This is the same kind of idea as being proactive. So against someone like Giant, if Giant uses a move that is not Tree Branch Smackdown on turn 1, you should probably be blocking for turn 2 because you may get hit with the Tree Branch. For Plague Doctor, the most common mistake I see people make is they open on turn 1 with Plague Grenade instead of Blinding Gas. Sure, you can crunch the numbers and you might kill them potentially a turn sooner, but honestly it's just way safer to start with Blinding Gas because the worst case scenario of opening with Plague Grenade is they all go before you, like the 2 backline enemies go before you, so your Plague Grenade doesn't even get damaged that round, and then next turn they go before you again, so you got hit 4 times without stopping anything, and then you get your stun off and they've taken 1 tick of damage. However, if you open with Plague Grenade, even if they go first on turn 1, they don't go at all on turn 2, so you're not getting hit again until turn 3. That gives you much more control over the fight, and it is very safe. So even if there are some kind of mathematical arguments for opening with Plague Grenade, usually in like 99% of the cases, it is better to open with Blinding Gas just because it's safer. With Occultist, the most common mistake I see people make is they heal too late with this character. Ideally, you want to be healing when people are at about half HP. This way, if you overheal by a ton, it's not that much wasted value, and if you low roll and hit 0 or 2 or something like that, they're not in life-threatening danger. They're still in danger, but they're not in like life-threatening danger. The mistake that people make when they do this with the Occultist is they wait till they're at like Death's Door, and they could have healed sooner. Sometimes you just get crit for, half your HP. That happens. But if you try and heal with the Occultist when people are at 0 HP, you might hit 0 yourself, and you might bleed them, and you might kill your teammates, and then you hate Occultist. You should be healing at about half. Don't be greedy, just heal sooner. The most common mistake I see with Man-at-Arms is pretty much due to him having the hardest turn 1 out of any character in the game, I feel like, and that is when they open with some kind of buff. If you are in a boss battle, opening with Bolster is okay, but if you're in a hallway battle, you don't need to open with Guard unless someone's in, critical HP levels because of the previous fight, and you don't need to open with Command. You should be opening with some kind of high-tempo move, either stunning the enemy or getting up your own riposte, or even Bellow, because even though you can open with a buff and that's slower, Bellow, if it sticks to everyone, it guarantees your entire team is pretty much going first next turn outside of like an incredibly fast enemy. So even if you Bellow on turn 1, you're going first on turn 2, so you don't really lose any value. So with Man-at-Arms, if you're not in a boss battle, try not to open with a buff. Instead, open with either Bellow, a stun, or riposte, or crush into rank 3. The most common mistake I see with Leper is actually in team building. It's not so much in playing Leper besides using Revenge outside of boss battles, but people make these really bad teams with Leper sometimes where like the team just doesn't have reach and you have no way to hit rank 4, and so rank 4 and rank 3 just blow you up with stress and they support the front line and stuff, and then people get mad at Leper because he can't reach. Instead of going, well, I just built a bad team, where no one on the team can reach, but I'm just putting it all on Leper for some reason instead of the team. You can see it in stuff like running Jester and Vestal together, so if you run Vestal with Leper, it's pretty good for support overall, but then if you run them with like Crusader up front, no one can hit rank 4, and so you're going to get beat up pretty frequently. So instead you have to run someone like Shieldbreaker who can control backlines, and that helps Leper a lot. So if you're struggling with Leper and you think he's bad, try and give him some good teammates or have some kind of strategy for reach, and then see if he improves for you. The most common mistake I see with Jester is kind of an inverse of the Man-at-Arms mistake, which is they don't use Ballad on turn 1. The reason Man-at-Arms buffs aren't that good on turn 1 is because he is a slow character and his buffs are slow. But if you use Ballad on turn 1 from Jester, it's kind of like using Bolster in the same idea, where your whole team gets a bunch of speed, and you're going to be going first next round anyway. So it's better to open with Ballad so you can do whatever you want afterwards and give your team accuracy and crit and try and high roll and stuff. So if you're running Jester, you should be using Ballad turn 1 every single time, unless someone is at like 95 stress and they're about to afflict. The most common mistake I see with Houndmaster is the one that I make, and that is misplaying the guard. The way the guard works is that even though it has 2 rounds of effect, the first one ticks off immediately when the guarded target takes an action, which means that the guard effectively lasts for 1 round. You have to up it constantly to make sure that the target is protected. Because I don't understand this, and I've seen other people not understand this as well, people die. So you have to make sure that you're playing the guard correctly and understand that it lasts 1 turn pretty much. The most common mistake with Highwayman is either starting him in position 1 or position 2. You don't want to open with point blank, and honestly you don't want to point blank by turn 2 as well. This is because usually you want to kill the back row enemies because they're squishier, and Highwayman has some okay damage with pistol shot. So you want to start him in either 4 or 3, so this way he can pistol shot on turn 2. And then also, he can have his riposte up, and then if you need to duelist advance again on turn 3, you have that option. The logic behind starting Highwayman up front comes from old Darkest Dungeon, where Point Blank was actually okay as an opener because the rest of his kit was kind of garbage. But ever since Highwayman has been rebalanced and retooled, you shouldn't be starting up in the front, you should be starting out in the back, so you have more reach and more options. The mistake people make with Hellion is all around bleed out, so it's either they don't use bleed out at all, so they're just afraid of the damage penalty, but bleed out also has a damage bonus, so it's really good to be spammed as an ability, especially against bosses that are up front. But the other side of it is once they discover that bleed out is good, they use it all the time, and you should not be opening a fight with bleed out. If there are other things that need to take damage and die first, you need to start with the moves that Hellion has that have reach. So you should be starting with Iron Swan, and then if it bleeds, and then once you're out of the backline targets and you have some frontline stuff you have to get rid of, that's when you start spamming bleed out. If you're doing that on turn 1 instead of turn 3 and 4, then you're not going to get as much damage out of Hellion, and you're going to leave the backline open to do more damage to you in terms of stress and supporting the front line. The big mistake I see with Grave Robber is people don't run Pick to the Face. Sure, you can have a dedicated range damage build with her and you don't feel like you need to run Pick, but honestly you should be running Pick to the Face on every single Grave Robber build, and the reason is sometimes you get thrown up front, you can't do anything about it, or in the worst case scenario, you start losing heroes, and once people start dying and Grave Robber is trapped up front, she has to be able to hit spot 1 in case she's going to be the lone survivor. And it kind of sucks because Pick to the Face is honestly a bad move. It just doesn't do a lot of damage, even though it has armor piercing. In many cases, you're better off just lunging the target or using poison darts. But you have to keep Pick on just for the functionality and flexibility of being able to hit stuff in the front from the front. The most common mistake with Flagellant is probably pretty obvious, and that is when you are not running Suffer. You should be running Suffer at all times, in all comps, for all missions. Okay, that was my attempt at a joke, but honestly the real mistake with Flagellant is using Exsanguinates or Redeem too early. Sometimes when you're playing Flagellant, you can be perfectly safe against whatever actions the enemy has left. This requires a bit of game knowledge, which is why I say Flagellant is kind of difficult sometimes. So if you understand that you're against enemies that can't kill you that turn, you know, you're not at Death's Door, and you don't have a damage over time effect on top of you, if you're in that situation, then trust that Flagellant is going to go first, especially against other frontline enemies, and then just hit Exsanguinate or Redeem next turn, and then use Punish that turn, for instance. The reason I say this is because there are 2 things that kill Flagellant in this game. The first is a heart attack, and the second is if he has to keep using his low HP skills repeatedly, because that reduces the healing he receives and the healing that he gives. So if he has to keep doing this repeatedly, he's not going to be getting a lot of HP back from his skills, and he's going to stay at low HP and risk dying. So it's very important to use these moves when you feel that you absolutely need to, and then also try and space them out so you're not in the situation where Flagellant can't get past half HP. The most common mistake with Crusader is that people treat him as a frontline bruiser only. This is not Crusader's preferred method of play. You should be playing Crusader as some kind of hybrid support that can do some damage and stun when needed. If you want to run him as damage, make sure you put him in the back of the party in either 4 or 3, so that way he can open with Holy Lance and help you get rid of these squishy backliners by turn 2. This fits the playstyle of Crusader too, because after 1 or 2 Holy Lances, he moves up to the front of the party, where he can stay up there and take hits safely, and then stun enemies and heal as he needs to. With Bounty Hunter, the most common mistake people make is they only focus on his damage. Bounty Hunter has an excellent control kit with his stuns and movement abilities that you should be using at the start of the fight to disrupt the enemy as much as possible. Then, once you're down to 1 or 2 threats left on the enemy team, you can start busting out the massive damage. The most common mistake with Arbalest is kind of a meta team strategical type of thing, and that's when people think they have to mark every single target that she's going to shoot. Against backline enemies that have no protection, she doesn't need the boosted damage from Mark because she can take them down in 2 hits most of the time, especially if she has someone else there with reach to help her out. For Antiquarian, the most common mistake people make is they use dodge Vapours instead of flash powder. So this is more prevalent at level 1 and 2 and stuff like that when the value of dodge Vapor is very low. It is not worth using. Flash powder is just numerically better. And even a champion where everything's the same in terms of value, if you're against one enemy instead of an entire enemy party, it's better to flash powder the singular enemy. The moral of the story is if you're going to use dodge Vapours, check to see if flash powder will be better instead. Finally, with Abomination, the mistake that people make all too often is they transform all too often. You should not be transforming every single fight with Abomination unless you have a team highly dedicated to accomplishing that, but most teams that run Abomination can run him in human form for most fights and he's just fine, especially if he has a couple of his good trinkets. Instead, treat transform as a panic button where you need some kind of emergency huge burst damage, and outside of those instances, leave him in human form. Alright y'all, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching. The next video is going to be in the same type of category as this. It's going to be called One Tip for each hero, so if you're excited for that, then keep it tuned here. Expect it either the day after or maybe a couple days past this one, I'm not sure yet. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.